wonderful week on The VUU. I'm Michael Tino, joining you from Peekskill, New York. I'm part of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, which brings you The VUU every week. It is a gray, rainy, cold spring day here in Peekskill, New York, and that means that my joints are feeling the cold pressure front, but my sinuses are glad that the pollen is being washed from the air. So my body is in conflict about it being a gray, rainy, cold spring day here in the Hudson Valley of New York. I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be positive about it. How are you today, QuianaDenae?
I am actually really well. I'm a Minnesotan, and luckily I say that there's a context to that, which is Prince taught us that sometimes it snows in April. And let me tell you, it snowed here today. It didn't stick to the ground or anything, but there was definitely big, huge, unidentifiable flakes in the sky. So it's a little colder. It's probably about 40 degrees. Snow is literally falling from the sky. And so I'm a little like, I need a bowl of chili. That's how I feel. It's a good day for chili and cuddles, which really means a big blanket at my house because we're still sheltered in place. I'm going to pass it to my Tanti.
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser and I'm in Seattle, Washington, where yesterday it was super warm and well, for Seattle, like, so I don't know if it even hit 60, but it was very bright and sunny. So in the sun, it's warm. And today it's back to, I had to wear a jacket walking my skinny cow dog. My dog looks like a skinny cow. You can follow me on Instagram if you want to see what she looks like. And she's got an attitude. She's a 5-year-old rescue and she doesn't care what I say. She just gives me side eye all day. And she's got these ginormous ears. Anyway, I love my dog. Her name is Gracie. So that's me. Chris, how are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Rivera. I use she, her pronouns, and I am coming to you from Augusta County, Virginia. I am back in the country. I know, sad face, Michael. Sad and happy face. I'm really happy to see my husband, my 2 dogs, but sad to have left Puerto Rico, which is where I'd been for the past 2.5 weeks, and just feeding my soul. And so I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited that it is like when I left, it was kind of getting into spring. Now it is sprung. Like it is super green and all the trees are like popping out. They're like, we're pretty too. We're pretty too here. We can show you. So it's been lovely. And I don't know who.
It's all good, Chris. We've got Tanner Linden, our communications PR outreach person behind the chalice. Tanner is taking your comments on YouTube and getting them to all of us here on the panel. So if you have things to say, if you have questions to ask, if you have things to add to this conversation, Tanner will make sure that we know what you are writing out there in VUU land on YouTube. So we are going to have a great conversation today, but before we do, UU Roundup, things happening in the world of Unitarian Universalism. I know that the Unitarian Universalist Ministerial Fellowship Committee has just finished meeting. And so to all of you out there who have been welcomed into Ministerial Fellowship, with or without a few contingencies, welcome. To all of those of you out there who did not get the news that you wanted from the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, our hearts are with you, and we hope that you can come to a space where you can do the work that was asked of you and be better for it. And I know it doesn't feel like that right now. It doesn't feel like you want to right now, but we love you and we're with you. QuianaDenae, you have stuff going on. Blueberries. I hear Blueberries is starting.
Ooh, well, I'm going to back up and go to tonight, to an event tonight.
Okay.
Just we're going to do them in order of calendar order because that's how my mind works. That's my stuff. Tonight, drum, which I'm not going to try to explain drum and break down all the letters because my mind isn't ready for all of that. They're having a space tonight, Time of Holding, which is going to be a BIPOC only space. So if you are really experiencing some of the, if you are living in America and you are in brown or black skin, you are welcome in this space. The truth of the matter is there's 100 reasons why you should need this space. Those things could include the recent state-sanctioned killing of Dante Wright. Those things could include microaggressions that have happened in your brick and mortar. Those things could include something that happened at your job. Everybody needs space for holding. And so Drum is offering that. I shared the link with Hunter. I don't think that's that person's name.
Tanner.
Tanner. Oh my gosh, y'all, this is my third Zoom in 3 hours. I had a 9, I did 10, 11, and now a 12. So I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. Let's just say you should go. Let's do that. And then let's move on to Blueberries. Blueberries is starting the spring cycle on the 24th of April. The first session is really dedicated to new families and folks who are just coming into the space, just to give you some orientation to how Blueberries works. Blueberries centers the lives and experiences of Black children, of Black Unitarian children. We focus on faith formation, and we also focus on identity formation. If you are the parent or caregiver of a Black child, but you yourself are not Black, your child is welcome, because we are focused on them and not on you. So in the most loving way possible, if you are parenting a Black or brown body and you want them to have some sacred or some closed space to be in community, hit up that link, register them. We'll see you on the 24th. Hardcore programming starts the 1st, and we'll be digging into babies and bailouts. We kick it off. We're faith in action. We're not playing around. So those are the 2 things I got on my UU roundup.
That's so exciting. I'm glad that that's starting for all the many reasons. For you, for the Blueberries, and for all the parents. Aisha, Chris, do we have other UU roundup items?
Just, so it's the second week of April, and all of the candidating announcements are coming fast and furious through for different congregations who are in the search process for their different ordained clergy person positions. So blessings to the search committees and the congregations and the candidates and the matching and all of the people that are involved. It's a huge village that it takes to make this happen. So
Yeah.
You all will get there, and may the matches be wonderful.
And we should note that there are fewer congregations in search for full-time ministry and more people searching for jobs than any year in anybody's memory this year. So there are going to be a lot of people out there who are disappointed in this season, and hopefully not a lot of congregations that are disappointed too, because we want our people to have jobs, right? Aisha, did you have stuff?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to lift up the powerful statement written by the lead ministry team of the Church of Larger Fellowship. So I think Tanner will be putting that in the YouTube chat, the link to it. It's, it's unequivocal. There's no middle of the road here. We need to defund and abolish the police state, the incarceral state. So that is what I believe our show is about today. So let's make it happen. Let's transform our society so we don't kill Black people and murder them. How about that? And brown people.
So we are really excited to welcome into our conversation Janine Gelsinger, who is the executive director of UUJAZ Arizona, and also a member of the Beloved Conversations virtual curriculum design team. Janine, and a friend of the VUU, a regular VUUer of the VUU. We're happy to have you here for this conversation about defunding the police, which to many people is a radical statement. It's like, and to us, it's like the baseline. Like, so we're so tell us.
White people, that's a radical statement. QuianaDenae, you have an urgent finger happening.
I do, because I think I think Janine is about to go ham in all the best ways, right? You're about to go hard as a And the point of me pausing is for two reasons. One, I want to acknowledge all of my siblings who are celebrating Ramadan right now. And I've called that into every meeting I've been in, every space that I've been in since Monday night. It's just tremendously important as I acknowledge my own faith journey and practices, that I honor those whose stories contribute to my own. So I want to acknowledge that. And then secondly, this is an intense conversation. The language in our conversation today is going to probably lean more towards adulty. It's probably going to include some F-bombs. We're working on that with our friend Aisha, but she's a work in progress. And so I wanted to I'm not censoring what anybody's saying, and I don't want anyone to be censored, but I want folks to be alert that they might hear some things that are hard, and might hear some things that come in a tone that's aggressive because there's so much passion behind it. So now I yield my time and the floor to the woman who persisted.
My, thank you. That's really important, I think. So yeah, Michael, you said it's, for some people, this is a radical idea, right? And we also know that in a lot of Black and Brown communities, the idea of creating your own community safety without relying on police is not new, because police violence is something that people can't trust to keep them safe. And so the idea behind defunding the police is, how do we keep ourselves safe without police? Because we know right now police are killing people, and that is not safe for anyone. So I've been working in Phoenix with an amazing coalition of 7 grassroots organizations, Black and Brown led, queer folks, trans folks. One of our organizations is led by folks experiencing homelessness. And we've been working together around policing in Phoenix. Phoenix is the 5th largest metro area in the country. And in 2018, the New York Times called us the deadliest police force in the country. In 2018, Phoenix PD shot 44 people. That's more than LA, New York, Chicago that year. And so we know in Arizona that sometimes we end up being the testing ground for fascist policies. You've seen what happens at our border. You've heard about Sheriff Joe Arpaio, that we got out of office in 2016 after 26 years in office. You've heard about how our public education is almost completely defunded. So we know what happens in Arizona is a testing ground for what happens in the rest of the country. But also in Arizona, we've learned to fight back, because we've learned to follow the lead for Black and Brown organizers that know how to create community safety beyond policing, without policing. And so right now we're working on a campaign to defund the Phoenix Police. We have a strategy this budget cycle to cut the Phoenix PD budget by 5%. That might not sound like much, but the Phoenix Police budget is $749 billion. And so cutting it by 5% means that we can fund programs that actually create community safety. So when we talk about that, we talk about things like education, mental health care, alleviating poverty, affordable housing, job training, things that actually create safety in communities, because we're caring for people instead of criminalizing folks. So that's kind of what we're working on in Phoenix right now.
I think, for white, there is a different conversation happening about policing in white America and everyone else, and Black and Brown Indigenous people, because white people in general cannot imagine not having a police force, because they take for granted that when they pick up the phone to call, the police will protect them, right? And so the idea of what is transformative justice, not even restorative. I've stopped saying restorative, because as it has been pointed out by Black activists, we're not going to restore to what? Modern day policing started as slave patrol. So where is the restoration, right? We don't want to restore to that. And so it's going to take just to your point, investment in education, investment in community care, and an invitation to reimagine doesn't exist right here. It doesn't exist in the United States, right? Of what does community care look like? Because we're so individualized, we're so, it's only about me, that in the United States, that the idea of communal care, people in the United States are terrible at communal care. They have to know the person, white people, know the person personally to take care of them. But if you say, well, let's fund an entire school system, somehow that's a problem for white people, where communal care for those who've been impacted by these oppressive systems is the starting point, like knowing who's in your neighborhood and caring for each other. And so it's going to take, to me, an expansion of imagination to stop thinking we need armed militia, basically, armed forces, police forces in our neighborhoods. It's an expansion of imagination that right now is limited in at least the psyche of white America. And that's true for conservatives and liberals. This is not just a conservative problem.
I think that's absolutely true. It's an imagination problem. And it's also a relational issue. I think sometimes that if I had a magic wand and I could create change in UU congregations, I would do, around this issue, I'd do two things. I would help them lean into imagining something's different than what they've known. And I would also somehow eliminate the fear of talking to each other around topics you consider difficult. When we were phone banking for the last election cycle, one of our amazing volunteers, someone I adore, said to me, so we're talking about the idea about canvassing your own congregation. Why don't you call each other and talk about policing? Let's have this conversation with other UUs. And what she said to me was, I phone banked a ton for my candidate in district, and I called lots of Republican voters and they yelled at me and were nasty. But I would rather do that than talk to someone I know about this. And I thought, we have a problem. We have a problem, UUs. We can't be afraid to have critical conversations with each other. We can't. Conflict avoidance is part of white dominant culture, right? White supremacy culture. And if we can't overcome conflict avoidance, how are we going to imagine a new world? If we can't imagine that new world and we can't invite each other into that dream of a new world and then invite each other into action towards that world by having these critical conversations, how is this going to happen? And so that's, beyond policy, that's digging down to what do we need to do as UUs? Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, no, QuianaDenae was going to say something.
I was just, I thought two things. One, I try to move at the speed of relationship, and relationships move at the speed of trust. And if I don't trust you, I can't be in relationship with you. So it takes time. And I think sometimes we're all about that instant culture. And so it's really hard. We're in the same room, we're both brown, so we're going to be best friends and we're going to solve. No, it takes time. I need to know who you are. I need to know that you truly have my back. And then the other piece that was coming up when Janine was talking is the role of rest. White supremacy says you can't rest, you can't slow down, you can't stop, you can't stop, you can't stop. And that means you don't have time to dream, you don't have time to imagine, you don't have time to generate new ideas. And so I'm wondering if I'm excited, I should say, by the way Black folks have been really taking up rest ministry and really leaning into rest and having space to actually imagine something different. And so when I think about white supremacy culture hurts white people, this is one of those times where that comes up for me. White people need to rest so that y'all can come up with some new shit. Y'all need to come up with some new ideas and imagine a world with truly that is not policed. But there's such a culture around running around and being so busy and inundated, there isn't time to dream a new world. It's that word that Aisha came back to, which is to restore. I just want to restore what was there before without having time to think about if what I'm restoring is worth restoring.
Right.
I want to bring in a few comments from the chat. Ty Ursendes de Perez says that she gets people saying to them, why do you live in Arizona? I guess that was in response to Janine's talking about Arizona being a testing ground for fascist policy. And Ty says that's because that's where the revolution is needed. It's also people's home. right? I mean, you live sometimes where your home is, and you make change where you are. And is that Catherine Childs, I think, says that white culture also positions success as the opportunity to disengage from community, not invest in it further. And I think that that's really tied to the police state and the reasons why institutions of policing that we have in this country exist the way they do. Because that's what they're that's what they're designed to do, to help some people, white people, rich people, disengage from the community by controlling through state sanctioned violence black and brown and poor people. So Chris, I'm sorry, I interrupted Chris.
No, I think that's super important to say. And one of the things that Janine reminded me of folks who are saying that, they'd much rather talk with a complete stranger than talk with somebody in the pew next to them once we get back to the pews next to each other. It reminds me that the Unitarian Universalists, there's this, I think, cultural mythology around us being conflict avoidant, or around white UUs being conflict avoidant. And I don't think that they are. I think because they're willing to be in conflict about lots of different things. Like, you bring the budget up at any UU congregational meeting, and they are willing to die on some hills around, what kind of toilet paper that should be used. So I think that where we want to see that shift is being able to talk about the things that are affecting black and brown lives, right? And that conflict is, I want us to get better about saying what it is the conflict avoidance is really about. Because it's not just about being nice, like, the Midwest nice or Southern nice or all of those different kinds of nices that are culturally appropriate. It's a conflict avoidance of talking about black and brown lives and what is happening to black and brown lives. And that's not okay. Like, you can be culturally conflict avoidant and just be like, oh, I can't, I don't like being in conflict. No, what you're actually conflict avoidant about is talking about the fact that racism exists and oppression exists and that black and brown people are being murdered. That's what you're conflict avoidant about.
And also avoiding wanting to or needing to call out other white people who are willing to make black and brown lives disposable, and to tell fellow white people that they are out of covenant when they take those positions. So I think that there's an avoidance of wanting to say those hard things, to needing to say those hard things. Janine?
And that's where conflict avoidance meets need for comfort, right? Because white folks are conditioned to resist being uncomfortable in any situation and expect that they have an expectation of comfort. And so you might engage in conflict when it's something that benefits you, right? Like the toilet paper in the bathrooms and the budget. But where are you going to avoid conflict? Well, when it makes you uncomfortable, when it's something that requires you to change your worldview or your perspective.
Well, was it Nancy McDonald Ladd that preached about the fake fights in our congregations, to Chris's point? And so when we have fake fights, then we don't have to take responsibility for transforming our society to make it more just and equitable. And, every now and then I think to myself, like, okay, what would it be like if each one of our congregations made part of being welcoming is being a place for, I'm trying to like, what if we each had a food bank, right? What if each of our congregations served undocumented people in a way that's like, how can we help you with resources and necessities and medical care? I mean, we we have 1,000+ brick and mortar congregations. Some have 30 people and a few have a few hundred. And I think we limit ourselves because more often than not, no matter, regardless of what people say, there is this desire for comfort more than for living out what it means to be part of a community. This isn't just about living out being a Unitarian Universalist. Of course, that's what brings us to this faith. It's also about what it means to be human. We're forgetting what it means to be human. And so instead we're moving to annihilation, and we're annihilating each other. Not we, those who are protecting the oligarchy in this police force. And there's so many facets to the problem. A big one is many of these police forces don't live in the community that they're policing at all. They don't live anywhere near the community they're policing.
Woo,
and so
thank you.
Right? Go ahead, QuianaDenae.
No, I was amening you.
I mean, so when there's a group of people who are completely removed from the people who they are there to protect and serve, then of course the disconnection makes things even worse. So when this happened, Dante was murdered, and then people started with, well, it was a taser and not a gun, or it was a traffic stop. And I'm like, hold up. This is anti-Black oppressive policies that have been in place since slavery. Stop with the fucking bullshit. Are you fucking kidding me? And then people are, I even get frustrated at politicians. Like, I love Auntie Maxine Waters, but she doesn't need to hold up a picture of a taser and a gun. We don't need to have that bullshit conversation, because that's what that is, right? Because this isn't even the first time that excuse has been used. Was it with there was another Black man was murdered, and we were told it was because it was a mix up between. That's not what any of this is. It's because Black and brown bodies are targeted by the state. And unless we're having that conversation, it's a nonsense conversation. And it keeps us from having the fundamental conversation that there is no reforming a system that is targeting entire groups of people for death, and then ask questions later. And if people bring up the bullshit arrest warrant, how about fucking Dylan Roof, who was murdered 9 Black people and was taken out for a burger in a bulletproof vest? So the police are perfectly capable of apprehending anybody with any warrant safely and alive. So that's a bullshit thing too that I don't want to hear. Okay, I'm done.
So glad I did that language warning. So glad I did that. But you did a good job.
So I can only speak from my own experience as a white person, but I want to offer maybe like a parallel to what QuianaDenae was talking about rest, in that some folks have had rest for an entire year at this point. I don't know if the solution for white folks with wealth privilege is more rest. I actually would push at that and say it's time for some action. Now, the last year has been hard for many people. I know some white folks with privilege who have illness in their family, taking care of parents, all sorts of things that made this last year hard. But I've also seen a lot of you gardening and making sourdough bread for the last year. So one thing that I experience sometimes as a white person with other white folks is that every time there's a high profile police killing in the news, that there's this like, I don't want to call it white lady hand flapping, but I'm just going to call it white lady hand. There's this like despair of like, what do I do? What do I do? And what I'm here to tell you is that when you are grounded in movement and you are taking action, you don't have to feel that anymore. Like being in relationship with people, with other people, digging into these issues and then knowing that you are taking action and bringing other people into taking action, that will stop that cycle of panic, of not knowing what to do. If you want to find joy and movement, get in. It's a lot of fun here. These phone banks that we're doing with our neighbors in Phoenix, it's white folks calling other white folks and talking about policing and city budgets. And they are fun conversations. People are excited. One of my favorite and not finding it's because what you should really be looking for is meaning. And I think that if we keep going to our churches and acting like they're a country club and we're afraid to have real conversations with each other, that we're missing out on the meaning and the groundedness and the relationship that can truly happen in community and serving out our missions the way that they're intended to be, and serving universalism. Like, we're universalists. That means we said no one is outside the circle of love, right? Wherever we're going, we're all going together, and we don't create hell on earth for other people. We don't throw people away in cages. We don't address poverty and pain and violence in our communities by locking people up. And so how are we living out our faith? How are we living out our mission? Yes, we need to take time to dream, and then we also need to act. We need you in this fight. We need everyone.
And thank you for, Janine, I want to thank you for calling that to task, because I was stumbling around it as I was saying it. And I guess what I was speaking more to is what you were saying, that there's a time some of us need to rest and time for some of us to act. But I think that when you start to pull away from white supremacist behaviors that are kind of ingrained in you, one of them is going to be that you slow down, that you rest, that you, and I'm not saying slumber, I'm saying like take a pause, take a deep breath, realize the work that you want to do and move forward in a meaningful way. But if you're just leaping from incident to incident and harm to harm, it's tiring. It makes you weary. And let me tell you, your Black and brown siblings and your white siblings who have been in the fight are tired and they are weary. We need a tap out. We need a change of guard just for a moment. We need somebody else to do this double shift. So when I say white folks maybe need to rest for a moment, I think what I was really trying to say is, how can you take out some of those white supremacist behaviors and lean into some of the knowledge and wisdom that Black and brown folks have been displaying for the last year in the struggle for equality, and apply them into your own life. It's great that you made bread. It's great that you now know that you can make bread without yeast. All of those things are great. Now apply them to the larger community. Apply the first principle, apply the second principle, apply the eighth principle to your life in a meaningful way. You have the opportunity and the means, because if you can make bread, you can make the way. So you can pick up a phone, you can send out a postcard, you can attend a bystander training. There's things that you can do to disrupt the patterns and behaviors that you've become accustomed to that make you feel comfortable. And I think you're absolutely right in that. I'm supposed to tell you something and I can't remember what it is. Give me a second. Michael, I want to ask you a question. I have an understanding of policing in other places, but you live pretty east and pretty north. So how does policing work in your community? How is that defunding work look in different communities? Janine's talking about her community, which is bombarded because it's kind of this, high traffic area, but what does defunding look like in smaller communities?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the news here comes from New York City, so that's not a smaller community. But I do live in a small city in the Hudson Valley, but my small city is at least half Black and brown people. It's tough here because New York actually mandated that every police force in the country institute a police reform committee. And police reform committees, I'm putting this in big quotes for those of you listening to for those of you listening on a podcast or just audio, are inclined to the mealy-mouthed incremental bullshit change that is not actually going to be real, to lead to real anything. And so it's hard because we've got a police reform commission that's seeking seeking feedback on their on their on their stuff, on their report, and I don't think even the Black and brown communities here feel empowered to say, "How about we just take this away and start over? How about we we get rid of this institution that is harmful to us and start from scratch?" There's not that level of imagination in the community that I live in, at least on any official level. I'm sure that there is that level of imagination in people. Those are just not the people who were put on the commission. Let's just put it that way. So it's just it's hard because I think people want to be like, oh, well, we can just reform our way out of this. And I know that the history of police institutions is really screwed up everywhere, right? So in the South, police forces started as slave patrols. In New York, the history of the New York Police Department, the NYPD in New York City, is as a force meant to control populations deemed undesirable in New York, and that included free Black and brown people, because New York was not a slave state at that point, but it also included quote unquote undesirable immigrants who were coming from Europe at the time. And those immigrant populations made themselves desirable by joining the police force. They made themselves white by joining the police force and oppressing other people. So I'm like, that institution has like really screwed up stuff in its DNA. And that's the history of policing in the Northeast. But it's messed up wherever you go, right? It's down into the DNA of the institution wherever you go.
Yeah, and that's why I say the goal can't be inclusion and diversity. It has to be liberation for anything. For when, I am also a consultant like Chris is, and I get hired to do DE&I work. No one is on the same page about what that even means. Let's be clear, at all. 2, just to Michael's point, every single police force is even if you have all white, you can make a case for diversity about gender or whatever. Diversity just means difference, right? And there are Black and brown people on police forces. The goal is liberation. It's not to diversify anything. It's to, in terms of oppressive systems, because it is the system itself that is the problem. It is not the people in it. It is also some of the people in it, but that's why when we wrote in this statement that the system's working as it is designed. And again, there was the tweets that somebody had tweeted about the Derek Chauvin trial. If you want to know, what the problems in this country, there's a 4-week murder about a 4-week trial of a murder we all saw. And George Floyd has been put on trial. It is beyond perverse. I don't have the language. I'm not following that trial because it's beyond my comprehension that something we all saw is somehow up for debate. That it's just, and then who was the person who killed Jacob Blake? Jacob Blake was just allowed back on the police force, and he was murdered in cold blood, right? So, and the murderer of Tamir Rice is on a police force somewhere. 12-year-old who was sitting on a swing. This list, unfortunately, is long.
Well, and here in Peekskill, they're all like, oh, well, a third of our population or 25% of our population, whatever it is, are Latinx immigrants. Our police force should be fluent in Spanish. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that like people don't care what language you're speaking as you're shooting them. Or when your knee is on their neck. Like that you are fluent in their native language is not the top thing. Yes, we need people doing community care who are fluent in the languages of of our city. Yes, yes, but
I'm glad you're lifting up reform, because in UU congregations, when I talk about defunding the police, there's a lot of why not just reform the police, right? So one document for UUs that like to read the research, right, is the MPD 150 that I like to lift up, that came out of Minneapolis, and Black Voices and a lot of the grassroots groups that are working in Minneapolis to defund police. And they did a study of 150 years of police reform, all the attempts that have been made to reform the police, and what the actual like statistics are coming out of that. And yes, MPD 150, that's right, Michael. And reform doesn't work. It doesn't work. And you can say that's because when something is rotten at the root, you need to pull it out of the ground instead of trying to prune it and make it pretty. We've talked about the history of policing as protecting white property by capturing Black slaves and bringing them back to their slaveholders. But also, I think it's really important to think about the culture, right? Which a lot of people have alluded to here. If you've ever been in a locker room or a fraternity house, and like not all sports teams, not all fraternities, you know, before everyone gets mad in the comments, but you understand how insidious culture can be. So even if you know that one police officer that's your uncle or your neighbor that you're like, oh, he's a really nice guy, when you have a culture that upholds the killing of Black and brown people, it is impossible to be the one to stop it. Because every time that happens, the New York Times just did an article yesterday about a female police officer that saw her colleague doing an illegal chokehold, about to kill someone, and stopped him, physically tackled him, stopped him from killing someone. She got fired. She lost her job. She lost her pension. And he is still in the police force winning awards. And so if you think, oh, we can reform this system, have you ever been the one to speak up in a locker room? Like, think about your experiences. Have you been the one to do that? And what happened when you did? Did everyone say, oh, you're right, we're going to all change our behavior and act differently now? In Phoenix, there is on ABC 15, a network news channel, there has been a series of reports every Monday that talk about the corruption and the violence in the Phoenix Police Department. It has to be pretty bad for network news to actually say anything bad about the police, but here we are. And one of the reports, it's really good, you should watch it. One of the reports is about the challenge coins that Phoenix police are issuing for as awards within their police department. Now, these aren't officially sanctioned by the Phoenix PD, but there's also documents that show that the chief of police knew about the challenge coins for at least the last 2 years and hasn't done anything about them. So these challenge coins are given by police officers to each other when they do things like shoot someone in the testicles with a taser. All these different like awards that they're giving each other for violent acts, for things they like. The images on the coins are turning things into jokes. It was called the challenge coin for that was called the Left Nut Challenge. And so when you have a culture like that, I don't know how you can tell me that there are good police officers in that culture, because they're all participating in this. And if they're not actively participating, then they're complicit by their silence.
Can you, I'm at a loss about what these coins are. I think you explained it, but I just need a moment. I just need a moment to make sure I understand. So can you speak more about that, Janine?
Yeah, the police officers are giving each other awards for violent acts against community members, specifically for like chokeholds and shooting people in various body parts. And they're like badges or awards. They're physically coins. They're making trophies and trading them with each other.
Okay, I'm just in awe. Thank you. I can't even process that.
That's horrific.
Ty points out in the chat that challenge coins are used throughout the country and that law enforcement officers trade them, collect them, and brag about them across police forces. This is not just like, oh, Phoenix is the bad apple, but like they wouldn't do that in New York. While they're trading them with New York, they probably use the same coins. It is absolutely disgusting. And Stitch Aru in the chat writes that diversity in policing is a means to indoctrinate BIPOC folks into participating in state-sanctioned murder of their own. And I just thought that was an important enough comment to read.
And so this goes back to, the creation of the policing forces, the slave patrols, because they had similar, trading cards as well, right? So, if you just go back to, like, all of this doesn't just arise from some bad actors in today's world. It arises from the fundamental idea that Black and brown lives are somehow less worthy, which was a idea that we had to have to predicate slavery, right? And to predicate colonization. There, you had to make a way to make it moral and just in order to treat another population a specific way. And that was the way to do it. So, let's talk about abolition. Because when we're talking about abolition, it's because abolition is a recognition that the system is working exactly as it was designed, and therefore we need to abolish that system. We do not need to reform that system. There is no basis on which that system can operate in which it would be liberatory. So if we look back at the creation of it, and even what it is today, we will see all of those trends and all of those kind of roots that feed back to that original premise. And I think that one of the things I know at CLF that we're talking about is where is the balance between education and action? Because there's only so much education we can do before we recognize that people want to be educated so that they don't have to act, right? They want to be educated, in all of the different nuances and all of the different ways, and need to be able to feel that they have a solid understanding of X, Y, and Z. And, at a certain point, we need to say, the folks who have the understanding of that are the folks that are living with it, that have the lived experience of it. And if you can't center that, then there's no amount of education that is going to get you there. And so the question then becomes, how do we lovingly hold folks who are not going to get there and move on? Like, we need to set up a lifeboat for folks who are not going to get there and don't want to get there, and make sure they've got a lifeboat, and we need to move on because people are dying. And I don't have a responsibility to educate someone to a point where they finally feel like it's okay for them to act while people are dying. Like, that's just not a balance that I can make. That I can say, sure, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to wait. I'm sorry. Well, I'm actually not sorry. I'm not going to wait. We will lovingly hold you in that lifeboat while we take the rest of the crew onwards, because we've got people who are dying, and I'm not going to tell them to wait. I love the idea that this work is generational, and it kills me that this idea of that this work is generational. And I remember when I first heard that term, an elder told that to me, and I was pissed off as all hell, because to me what that was saying was my children are somehow expendable, that we know they're not going to get free in their lifetime. And so, it's going to be another generation that's going to reap the rewards of this work. And I'm not willing to say that. I'm not willing to say that about my kids. Nobody should be willing to say it about theirs or say it about mine. That somehow it's okay for my children to be expendable while we generationally do this work. Fuck that.
Amen.
I think, Christina, you're brilliant as usual. We struggle all the time with a balance of education and action, right? And what I think is important to lift up is exactly what you said, that we will meet you where you're at. I understand that for some people, they didn't realize this was a problem until the last couple of years. I'm white. I grew up in a suburb to a Republican Catholic family. When I was 6 years old, my parents took me to the park to get me fingerprinted by the police. Never entered their consciousness that they should maybe not put their child in the criminal justice system, because they were thinking, you know, if our kid gets lost, the police will be able to find her, or if she's kidnapped or whatever. And so I did not have the experience of the police as anything but protectors and helpers when I was a child, because that's what my privilege afforded me in the bubble that I grew up in. So yes, we will meet you where you're at if you're learning. But at the same time, there are people in our congregation who are ready to take action, and our partners are asking us. Poder in Action, our partner for this phone bank, specifically said, Janine, can you get some UUs to help us with this? Because they think of us as the people who show up. So are we going to be the people who show up, right? If you're not ready, if you need to read, if you need to start another book group, okay. But if you read the books, if you understand the issues, if you've watched this today, another way you can learn is just by acting. You can come to Saturday Phone Bank. It's held from UUJAZ, Side with Love, You the Vote, a big national phone bank called UU's Call AZ. We need you all to call in and help us talk to our neighbors in Phoenix to take this action to cut 5% of the Phoenix PD budget and move it into community resources. If you've never phone banked before, it's okay, we'll train you. If you're nervous, it's okay to be nervous, but that doesn't have to keep you from acting, because your grief and heartbreak around seeing Black people get killed by the police over and over and over, that is stronger than your fear. And I know that you have the courage and the conviction and the mission and the values to do something like this. So you can come on Saturday and we'll train you. But if you've heard this over and over again, let this be your call to action.
Amen. Amen, amen, amen. I don't know who is facilitating today, but I think that might be a good place to to close. I know we're a couple of minutes early, and we could go on and on for hours on this, but I just really wanted to appreciate this space, the space that the VUU provides to have these conversations, and to say the truth that needs to be heard within Unitarian Universalism. And I appreciate the folks that come on here and are willing to say it.
I want to thank all of you. It is really trying to snow. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, those flakes just looked real. Like, do I need a shovel? Like, I was like, whoa, Nelly, focus. This is such a tender topic. When we decided to take it on, it was one of those, like, is this okay? Is this the time? Folks in Minneapolis in particular are still chest and heart deep in the struggle. But to not talk about police reform when the reform is so evident, when it is so clear that this is the work that needs to be done, seemed a disservice as well. So I just want to acknowledge that a lot of our energy and hearts, at least mine, are with those folks in Minnesota who have spent damn near the last year in a military zone of a militarized life. And it just breaks my heart. And I can't stress enough, if you have genuine ways and connections and people in those communities that you love, to reach out, to check on them, to offer your ear, to be a presence for them as they continue to grasp the violence of their lives and hope that they can move towards healing.
I also want to say we talked about some really hard things today, and we named violence that's happening. And I know Blue has a pastoral care line that you can find on their website. So for folks that feel like this is hard and you need care, I hope that you'll reach out to other youths for support.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, everybody. Yes, this was until we abolish the police, this will always be a source of rage, as far as I'm concerned. And we will continue to tackle this. And the Church of the Larger Fellowship is very clear that we will work toward abolition of both the carceral state, abolition of prisons, and abolition of the police state. No one in this country no one anywhere should be living this way. So that's it for today. That's our episode of The VUU. Thank you, Janine, for being on. Thank you, Michael, QuianaDenae, Chris, and Tanner behind the chalice. We honor you all, and we will see you next week on another episode of The VUU. Ciao.